It's time to start making the parts that will go into the final CD welder. After a bit of testing, I think I'm going to need about 6 of the 0.47 farad capacitors. So I'm making a capacitor tray that will hold up to 8 caps, that way allowing for a bit of future expansion. Better to add a bit of plastic and copper now rather than have to build the whole thing all over again. I'm making the cap tray out of 3/8 inch thick acrylic sheet, cutting out a base about 11 inches by 15.5 inches in size. I'm now going to cut 4 pieces to make the risers to hold the main 2 bus bars. Now cutting them out with a 1/4 inch bit means the inside of the notches will have rounded corners. I'm just going to square up the notches with a hand file, as I could use a bit of exercise today anyway. The nice thing about working with acrylic, it's pretty easy to cut and very easy to glue up. The not so nice thing, you don't want to breathe the vapors from the glue. I'm using Welder number 4, so don't have a lot of time to get the pieces in position, but at the same time only have to hold them in place a minute or so. The risers are to hold the main bus bars at the same height as the capacitor terminals. The capacitors will be on 3.5 inch center to center distance, so each riser is on the same spacing, just offset from the center of the capacitor, so not to interfere with the bus bar connections. The scrap pieces of acrylic I have access to are just plain cast acrylic, no flame retardant additives, so I won't ever leave this thing energized and unattended. The only time I've seen this acrylic burn was when I was practicing flame polishing with a torch, but it didn't put itself out, so I do consider it a fire risk. Now it's all glued up, I'll let it set overnight to reach near full strength. The capacitors are pretty heavy, so I want to make some holders to keep them from moving around. I'm going to make the holders out of 1/2 inch PVC board. It really is some of the easiest material to cut out and can be glued together with most any PVC glue. I'm cutting out 3 pieces for each holder. Each piece is a little different, as I thought I might need access to tape the capacitors in place. Probably just a little bit overdoing it with that, but it didn't add that much to the complexity to assembly of the holders. Just have to apply some glue, line them up, and put a little weight on them for a few minutes. I'm mounting the holders to the bottom of the tray with screws. The capacitors need to line up across from each other, because I'm going to use one bus bar to connect the positive terminals of 2 capacitors to one of the main bus bars. I'm just drilling and tapping the mounting holes by hand. I found that if you keep the tap cool and go slow with it, the threads in the acrylic are quite good and quite usable for an application like this. Now that should limit any twisting torque on the capacitor terminals, as the bottom of the capacitors can't move much, and if I need to I can strap the capacitors to the holder. I'm cutting 2 main bus bars out of 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch 110 copper bar. These 2 bars will be the connections for the welding leads. Also the positive terminals of the capacitors will attach to one bar, and all the MOSFET switchboards will attach to the other. So when the MOSFETs turn on, all the current to the weld will flow through these 2 bars. The bar that connects the positive terminals of 2 capacitors to the main bus bar is 1/8 of an inch thick by 3/4 of an inch wide, 110 copper. Now the bar has to be bent to clear the other bus bar. I'm bending the bars with this cheap little bender. The lack of rigidness of the bender does mean a little extra work straightening up the bends. Also, it seems the copper bar will cup just a bit at the bend. So I'm just going to use a file and flatten the area where the bars will contact each other. Of course, I should have drilled all 4 capacitor bars the same and used them to line up the capacitor holders. But I didn't, so now the capacitor bars are not interchangeable. Not a big deal, but it's something I would do different next time. To mount the capacitor bar to the main bus bar, I'm using a high-grade 6mm socket head cap screw with a thick, hardened washer on top and a flange nut on the bottom. I'm filing around the drill holes to make sure the contact area is reasonably flat. The only antioxidant I had on hand was some old Kremlin blue. It probably still works fine. Now I'm torquing the screws to 13 Newton meters, about the recommended maximum for these lubricated screws. So if I'm reading the right chart and doing the math right, that should give me close to the 30 newtons per square millimeter needed for a good electrical connection. The copper bar I'm using to connect a MOSFET switchboard to its capacitor and main bus bar are 1/16 inch thick and 1 inch wide. Again, made of 110 copper. These thin bars will be soldered to the MOSFET switchboard. Now half of the MOSFET boards will have to have longer main bus connecting bar, which are the ones I'm starting with. And here I'm bending the bar to clear the other main bus bar. The 4 on the other side will be much simpler. The ends of the bars that are going to be soldered to the MOSFET board need to be held between 0.85 inches and 0.9 inches apart. So here I'm making a holder that will keep the thin bars aligned while they're being soldered. I tested soldering some 1/8 inch thick bar, and because of how that went, I decided to move to 1/16 inch bar. Now I haven't test soldered the thinner bar yet, but it's what I bought, so it's going to have to work. So that is an adventure yet to come. Thank you for watching.